Well, I guarantee you'll learn, well, I shouldn't do this. I'll bet $1 that all of you will learn at least one thing tonight. Now, it might not have anything to do with Java, but you'll learn one thing. So really what I wanted to try and do was, because a fair number of you guys are already active in kind of an Agile space, or you thought about it, you're interested in it. But as we talked about, there's a high demand for what you guys do. That's a pretty cool place to be. There was just an article somebody sent me today from eWeek where they sent out a thing on how high in demand Java was and how the costs or the salaries are going up. So, yay you. It's a good thing. So anyway, so I want to talk about some basic things and some tools. A lot of this stuff you guys go, yeah, we do that. And I'm hoping that you'll get one little niche. But really what I'm also hoping is I'm not the fount of all knowledge. You guys are. Collectively, you're all smarter than me. So what hopefully as we go through this and you hear things and you can say, yeah, we do that, but that tool sucks. Hibernate sucks, use iBatis, right? Or yeah, we got that problem. What do you guys do about this thing? And that's what I'd really like to get to is some more interactive stuff. So they'll be falling asleep there. So Agile Scrum and XP, I'm going to fly through some of the basic stuff. And to the degree that you want to use this, if you come on this job or another job and somebody says, well, I don't want to do this, or we can't, Tim was, I work with Tim. We just had one of our cohorts is in China trying to explain to a team why they should do automated unit tests. Like, well, we don't want to do unit tests because if we invest in unit tests and then things change, we have to go fix unit tests, and then we don't get new code. And so we had a wonderful, very erudite discussion on email about why unit testing is good and how to do it well. So there's many ways to talk about what we're doing here. But Agile in itself is really a set of principles and values that talks about how to do development well, how to collaborate and adopt to reality. The thing I was thinking about the other day is, and I'll get my dates wrong. 2 years ago, Twitter didn't exist. 4 or 5 years ago, the iPhone didn't exist. The world is changing. As much as we think, well, the whole thing of everything that can be invented has been invented. No. Even though we're seeing some pretty dramatic things, there's something that's going to be really cool that ships in 6 months. I don't know what it is yet, but it will be out there. So we got to have a process that's adaptable. Scrum itself is a project management framework that sits kind of under the set of values that says, let's deal with reality. And the fancy word is empiricism. Let's look at reality and figure it out from that. And then under that is XP, which is about software development practices. So in our firm, we borrow shamelessly from all three. We steal good ideas wherever we can find them, and hopefully you do too. So how do you get there? Well, and specifically, this is how it might impact you. So to the degree that you're not allowed to do some of these practices that you wish to, that's what I want to talk about tonight. And what can you do to yourself to get more agile now and in your future works? And what can you do without official support? So there's the old joke is ask for forgiveness instead of permission, right? So if you've got a good technique and you want some new tools, or you want to get better, you want your team to get better, there's some ways that you can do that. So again, I'm not going to teach you Agile in 5 minutes. This is the Agile Manifesto. If you haven't read it before, it's a good thing. And again, it's for those that just remember, we value these things more than these things. It doesn't mean we don't value these things. Okay? One of the challenges that I'm finding, that you can find both on internal development and should you do contract work, is this one. How to collaboration over contracts. What is an Agile contract? Still a fairly immature field. I think I found one example. Somebody says, here's an Agile customer contract. Here's how to do that. A lot of that's a still to be invented thing. To the degree that you're working with internal staff and saying, I'm going to commit to you that if you give me $5 million, I'm going to deliver something cool to you, and they try and get you to write it down, how do you do that in an Agile way? So there's still it's great, yeah, we want to have collaboration. The contracts haven't gone away, and coming up with a better way to come with some firm agreement, there's some real room for growth there. Principles of Agile, and again, this isn't any found knowledge. You guys have probably already know this and should know it well. I tried to highlight some of the main things. Deliver working software frequently. It's really all about it. Work together wherever possible. Here's one for a group like yourself. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the work of not done, is essential. What we say in our classes is, what's the cheapest code to maintain? Zero code. The code that is not written is cheap to maintain. It doesn't cost you anything, right? So think about some way to use what you got, or not write it, or simplify the requirements and not write software. Kind of weird. You're saying the best thing for me to do is do nothing? Yes, that's the best thing for the business. The other one here is, and part of the reason you're here today is, how are you going to reflect on how you're going to be better? If you're in an organization that does not regularly stop and turn around and retrospect, from the Latin to look behind you, if you don't look behind you and say, what did we do well and what can we do better, you will not improve. Pretty simple. If you want to improve, it's no guarantee, but it's a start of a process. What's beautiful about this, you can do this on a personal level, on a family level, on a girlfriend level, on a boyfriend level. You can look back and say, I should have not gone on that 23-mile hike on that first date. That was probably a bad thing to do. So the next girlfriend I have, I'm not going to take her on that hike on the first date. Sorry.
There's an experience slipping in there.
So again, what does this mean to you? Is the Agile principles are really about get complete working software. Now, for those of you, and I've heard some conversation about guys that are architects, and as a profession, we say that we've kind of built this up, that if you're a senior developer, your goal, professional goal, is probably to become an architect of some kind, right? That's a position of eminence. Your wisdom can be spread out through lots of people. What Agile says is, don't kill all the architects. It says architects, the best architects, the guys that are going to have the biggest impact are the guys and the gals that are okay to roll up their sleeves and have hands dirty architects. Those are interesting. Less specialization. So to the degree that you're a UI developer, that's probably not a cool thing. If you're just a specialist in middleware and that's all you do, that's probably not a good thing. As a team, what you want to do is spread that knowledge. Change is good. Ambiguity happens. So don't get upset with your users if they don't give you perfect requirements. If you're going to build trust with them, you got to do it by cutting them some slack and saying, yeah, I know I told you to make it green yesterday. Today I want it blue. And you say, okay. Sorry, I forgot my little cool clicker to work together. So I know as developers, you got into this profession, so you're going to have to talk to people. Sorry, you're going to have to talk to people if you want to get better, if you want to actually contribute more to your enterprise. Sustained pace. You guys know what the student syndrome is? Wait till the last moment. Let's play Halo all night. I've got 3 days to write that paper. Right? I'll just stay up all night before and get it all done, right? So not starting, waiting, using all your buffer. Student syndrome. Sustained pace. Don't kill yourself. Don't kill your peers. Be excellent. Be proud of it. The fact that you're here tonight is another sign that you guys care about being good at what you do. Encourage it. Expect it of your peers. Expect excellent. Don't settle for okay. You know, say, well, why didn't you go to No Fluff? Why haven't you read this new book? Darn it, let's be better than we've been. But don't go play. Don't spend time and time and time. Be done and move on, because people really don't want to gold plate at Yugo. They want a car that gets them to school. Good is better than perfect. But as we said before, nothing is best. So the old saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Good. Get good. Now, is that in conflict with be excellent? Do what you're doing. When you do it very well. But don't obsess on it. Don't iterate. Don't spin into the ground on getting it done. Be a grown-up. Work with limited supervision. One of the principles of Agile is self-organizing teams. To old guys like me, that sounds like a communistic plot. But if you're going to be worthy of working by yourself and setting your schedule and delivering on your own commitments, then you need to act like that. You need to come into work without somebody checking to see, oh, Dave isn't here yet. It's 10:30. What's going on? Well, Dave needs to show up and do his job every day, and then it's okay. So be grown up. Look back, get better in the future. So we'll do a quick Scrum thing. And if anybody doesn't know the Scrum stuff, just holler at me and I can stop anywhere along the way. You've got these product guys that have a perfect vision of what they want the future to be. We were talking before the session about at No Fluff, and I didn't get to go, but we had a brown bag at work talking about No Fluff, and they said in one of the keynotes, where the guy says, this is a great time to be an entrepreneur. There's so many new technologies out there. There's new opportunities being created. If you wanted to do something, this is a great time to be alive. So now it's your job to put yourself in a marketing's chair and figure out what that great idea is. The beauty of Scrum and Agile is that you can validate whether your ideas are good on a quick basis. So you do the backlog, you do your daily meetings, right? This is all good, everybody knows this stuff, right? Okay. So what does it mean to you if you're not currently doing all this stuff? Well, everyone estimates. That means you got to figure out how you're going to do estimating. When's the last book or article you read about estimating? Be better at estimating. But there's cool ways. This affinity estimating, I call it proximity estimating the other day. Affinity estimating is a very powerful process. We've estimated 300 stories in about 2 hours of affinity estimating. It's pretty cool. We helped the Microsoft game team estimate an entire year's worth of stories in about 3 hours. It was pretty cool.
Check to see that your estimates are actual.
No, that's a classic question, and it's a good question. And I'll give you the Agile answer. The Agile answer is I don't care. The Agile answer is I'm going to deliver on a regular basis, and I'm not going to check to see how good I am at estimating. That's the textbook answer.
Wouldn't that be the retrospective?
No.
That's a consultancy company.
Looking at your estimations, your velocity, and then retrospecting and re-estimating to reevaluate based on new knowledge.
You're also not supposed to estimate in real time.
True.
So,
In story points. So the point being that you use at a high level when you're looking at all your estimates, because you're at all your stories that are fairly high level, you come up with some high level estimates that aren't perfect. But over time, once you have an established team and you can get a good velocity, you can say, here's what I think my velocity is going to be, here's what my sprints are going to be. And then every sprint, you can come back and revisit, how am I doing on the release? How am I actually doing? And do I need to update my estimates?
So another question is, what did you estimate in? Okay. And Microsoft bought that?
They did. It was very interesting. It was a very interesting process. Management was more supportive initially than the developers. A lot of developers didn't want to be there. Why estimate at all? We're just going to do work and ship stuff. Was a lot of the attitude, to be honest with you. But in the end, it showed them that even using their best techniques, there was a bunch of stuff they couldn't get done. And that was a good thing for management to say, okay, now what are we going to do? We've got 5 teams, we want to do this, we think we can do this, now what? It was a really healthy conversation.
So e-scoping was the results.
Moving things around, because they had an initial set of priorities, and then they said, okay, these fall off the back because of either priority or time sequencing of things. And then that made them say, what if I reprioritize? And you could call it de-scoping, or you could say push into other releases, or those kinds of things. So it's interesting.
Besides being sarcastic, I actually had a reason for asking that, because estimating is such a difficult thing to do. And even if you do try to do it right, you're going to be wrong, okay? And the feedback to try to improve that doesn't seem to be helping in a practical manner. I find from my experience that I'll estimate or have our group estimate something, and we try very hard to be as accurate as possible, ship off things and move things around in order to fit what we needed within a schedule or cost constraints, whatever our constraints was. We'll do it and we'll find that we're just too short, too long, way out, left field. We try to improve upon it and never seem to be zeroing in on something that's useful.
Okay.
I was gonna say, your flaw in the premise is not that estimating is hard, it's accurate estimating is hard.
Okay.
But the point is that XP and Agile don't ask for that. They don't ask for accurate estimation. They ask for relative estimations, which are then applied to your velocity to actually give you projections.
And the real world is you have limits.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have-
So-
You have
But
financial
it's
limits,
the
you have
tracker.
user limits and things.
It's the
that
tracker
they're
that
trying to-
converts these story points into time, not the developers. And if the developers are trying to change at the same time, you're trying to solve a single equation by changing two variables.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and so I don't want to
It's a huge
diminish in
challenge.
any way. The question for you guys didn't hear is, what do you do with if you're being asked for estimates? You've got you've got venture capitalists saying, when are you going to ship this product? And I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to give you money based on your answer. That's a no shit deal, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a very much a reality. By the way, I don't have a perfect answer for that. It's just hard. You can get better, but as was stated, part of what Agile and Scrum say is do your best, but realize that estimates are, in the end, some guesses. We aren't going to be we're not going to approach some kind of perfection. We get better as if you follow McConnell's, the cone of uncertainty down. As you get nearer the work and the work gets smaller, your estimates get better. So Agile acknowledges that by saying, decompose your stories, do them in a sprint's worth instead of 6 months worth of time, and really focus on, at least initially, on that multi-levels of estimating, right? So within a sprint, you say, let's test this out. Let's convert points to man hours. Let's do man hour estimates within this thing. And now let's see if that still fits within whether or not we think we can get done. I was just rereading Mythical Man Month. And if there's ever, I didn't realize that if there was ever a Bible for waterfall, that was actually one of them. And he talks about how do you improve estimates. And if you get those architects together, those really smart guys, they'll be the ones who will come up with those good estimates. But my personal experience is estimating's hard. It's just hard. And it's the best you can do is your near-term estimates are there. Your longer-term estimates are built. If you're talking to those venture capital guys or that CFO, it's really based on what trust you've built up by delivering, your capacity to deliver on a regular basis. That's what's going to help you when you come along and say, well, I've got this many stories and I think I'm going to be able to release, and here's October 30th, and we can't ship anything for Christmas season after October 30th, so I think I can get this much done. And you have to have some faith. And what the really uncomfortable part is, so I'm sorry, this is one of our processes for Affinity Estimating. You put stories on walls. So we've gone all the way around a room like this, right? When you have 300 or 500 stories on it. And again, we just did this for a large telecom vendor, or a large telecom company about 2 weeks ago in Atlanta. Had 500 stories. And that's what the senior directors and VPs wanted. That they wanted that 500 stories done. Well, the team went off, estimated, and they said, well, we can get about 120 of those done. We can assume it goes around. And they said, well, we can get to right here. Well, that's kind of uncomfortable, because I wished to have this. So you can manage by wishing, and wish to get all that stuff done, and be disappointed, or you can have some confidence, because you've done some delivery, that you're going to hit about here. And now, 5 months ahead of time, I can start having discussions that says, what if I don't get that done? That thing that's beyond that mythical line, what am I going to do about that? And it's the classic thing of let management have some information, let them have some facts, then they can start to deal with, do I move scope? Do I de-scope? Do I add capacity? Do I change my commitments?
And this is really where, the hardest thing that you will ever do is look at yourself honestly without any positive bias of, your mother told you you were a good person. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot at the end of the day. And once you if you could take a large enough set of of your history, your own personal history, you'll have a sense of where you go.
Yeah.
It may not be 100% accurate, but you're not looking for 100% accurate. You're looking for enough information for now.
That's a great.
One of the best estimating stories I ever heard was a friend of mine, based on his experience working at this particular company for 7 or 10 years, said, you know, I've come up with my method of estimating. He was up in Canada. For every 1,000 kilometers between me and the customer, add 2 weeks. For every person on the team over 4, add 2 weeks. You know, he never at any point talked about the feature set. He
Right.
talked about all the things that get in the way of delivering functionality.
Yeah, good point.
And then he applied it to his years of experience and found that he was within about 20% error bars.
You gotta love cultural knowledge. The other thing I liked about that story, because I think one of the things that Agile and Scrum do is they hold up a mirror to the organization. Now, if you're like me and you look in the mirror, you're like, oh crap, my mom said I was good looking. What the hell is that old bald guy? You know, scares the hell out of me, right? Well, so that happens with organizations. So when you say, I know you wish that you were young, blonde, and beautiful, but young, blonde, and beautiful's over here. You're 50 and bald and fat. You're over here, guys. Sorry. You know, that's the reality you got to deal with. Now, all those old, bald, fat guys ought to go deal with that reality. So it's a good thing. And by the way, somebody asked me about how do we do, because we do contract development too, right? Somebody says, well, what do you do if somebody comes to you with a big bunch of work? How do you estimate it? My answer is, it's $1 million in 6 months. How's long? $1 million, 6 months, 5 people. Yeah. Next question.
I was just going to say that your comment about the architect estimating. I've been on teams where the experts who know the domain estimate. Guess what? They never make their estimate.
Well, the problem is, as I said, is, and I got there's another piece on here I want to get to. I'm just going to put all these up, and then we'll. Oops. Let me go backwards. How do I go backwards? I'm so glad somebody's smart in this room. Be careful, and I think I got it in the XP side, is be careful about imposed commitments. Because if Tim does my estimates, and he's a really smart guy, oh yeah, I can do that in about 2 days. That's going to take me 2 weeks. I'm a normal human being, right? I'm not the rock star guy. So actually having the rock star, you almost need to take the rock star and put them out of the room and let the normal human beings do the estimates, right? Because then they can come in and look like geniuses, and the normal human beings can go ahead and deliver.
Comfortable committing.
Yeah, exactly, they do. And it is all about a shared commitment. What are we going to do? I got a call on the way here. I have a little 2-man team. We had some bumps in the road on a delivery. We delivered some stuff. We were late in integrating, got some challenges. So his commitment, he said, I got to go coach my son's soccer practice. And he called me, he said, hey, I'm going to come in after my practice to finish up this chunk of code on signature capture. I didn't ask him to do that. He just felt the commitment to that project to make that happen. Now, as long as if he did that every night, I'd be pissed, because then he's going to get divorced and bad things are going to happen. So again, the other thing I like about the daily scrum, I was just in a class talking about to a guy who's actually marketing. He says the beauty of like the daily scrum, the daily stand-up, the 3 questions, is there's no hiding. If you spent yesterday in meetings and you didn't get anything done, you didn't get anything done. There's no hiding. You either got work done or you didn't. That's the beauty. I think that if every organization, every group in every organization had a daily 15-minute stand-up and they talked about the 3 questions of Scrum, the world would be a better place.
Not necessarily. As you said, Agile encourages to drive the stars out of the team. So the majority rules. So if majority is not so skilled developers, they quickly get comfortable with very relaxed estimates and deliver to those estimates. But that's how we end up being bald fat guy and not the blonde.
There's an assumption there that we don't want rock stars. No, I like rock stars as long as they can play on the team. To the degree they can't, there's Jeff Sutherland came and talked to us a couple years ago, and he had the story of if you have a rock star that delivers 5x of a normal human being, right? And you've got see if I get my story right. 6 people on the team. That guy plus 5 others. So together, they deliver his 5 and their 5, so they deliver 10 in total, right? So 10 total points. You take the rock star off, and those people can double they do better. They're not ashamed, they're not beat down by the expertise of this guy telling them that they're stupid. They actually can deliver a little bit more, and they go from 1 to 2. Now you've delivered the same amount without the rock star. I had a guy, a really brilliant guy, a .NET guy, one of the best developers I've ever met, but he continually would throw people under the bus. Everybody that wasn't as smart as him, he would throw under the bus. He would say, I've got to redo their work, it's no good. And he was toxic to teams. And I finally came out and I said, dude, you're awesome. You're one of the best. You're a great developer. And to a degree, I can find one-man jobs. I'll put you on that work. But I'm never putting you on another team again. Because you decrease the capacity of other people with your attitude.
That happens too, but
Yeah.
the opposite happens more often when less skilled developers drive out smarter developers, which are not toxic, but just
Yeah.
trying to improve velocity and introduce some change. But because that majority is just comfortable in
Yeah.
that relaxed atmosphere, they just drive
And where did they
smart.
drive out those more talented developers to?
Because you want to hire them.
Someplace.
It depends.
If all projects are done with 10 people, then that means there's more people to go to a competitor and do a product that will put that one out of business. And then still fixed it.
Right, but since I'm kind of committed to a company and want to do a better job and don't want the competitor to win the business, I'm trying to improve the situation. However, that swap doesn't allow that. And
So I have some good news for you. What's driven me out of companies is fighting people to do anything that looks anything like this, and then wanting to stick with what
I've
they
seen a lot of that.
had before. So if they don't want to play this game, then they don't get to.
what I'm saying that I see that people actually use rules and follow them to actually do the opposite of the spirit of Agile.
That's
And
unfortunate.
certain things in Agile, I think, encourage them. Like, there is nothing
I think it's a
about quality.
3x3Y thing. I'm probably not going to. That almost sounds like a religious discussion.
Just a question about the daily Scrum stuff. So we use Scrum, and we tried the daily Scrum part. It's one of the few things in Scrum that never worked for us.
Was that right?
Yeah, and so I feel like we must have not been doing it. Somehow we must have not been doing it right.
Did you
So-
stand up?
Yeah, we stood up. We did all across the board. Essentially, what it became was it was just so obvious. It's like, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm working on the thing that we just talked about yesterday, right? It's like maybe it's because there wasn't anybody hiding. It was just so repetitive, and eventually we just stopped doing it. It's like there was no useful information. So there must have been something we were meant to be getting out of this that we weren't getting. So what were we meant to be getting?
Maybe you
Who
need
was
to
doing
break
this?
it down into smaller units so
Yes.
the person has something to accomplish.
Well, that sounds good, but I mean, but in many cases, it's unless you're working on the same piece of code, it's not very interesting, right? If you're working on a UI piece and I'm telling you about the database, it's like you don't want to hear about it, right? I mean, it's actually not an interesting conversation. If we're both working on the database, then great, right? We have a great conversation.
Yeah.
See, the place that I'm working at, I actually have the luxury of working at a place that has been working very hard on implementing Scrum, and we've definitely had challenges, but I mean, it's been a lot better than a lot of places I've been at. And we actually ran into that recently where somebody kind of brought that up as like, well, I'm tired of standing around listening to people talk about these things that I'm not interested in, and we changed the tenor of our Scrum where instead of everybody just doing that thing, we had somebody driving it and going, well, what about this task? What about that task? And after a couple of days, I actually went to the project leader and I said, I'm losing information because, yeah, if I'm working on the UI and you're working on the database, most days, I'm going to say a little bit about what I did, you're going to say a little bit about what I did. We're probably not going to say anything that directly impacts each other, but once in a while we will. Once in a while you say, oh yeah, I'm working on the database and I'm going to remove these fields and blah, blah, blah. And I go, wait a minute, I was depending on those to be there.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just it becomes another little bit of background ambiance that a lot of the time, it just is there. You don't see why you should care about it. But when it goes away, you notice the absence. And And so, yeah, it isn't something that is filled with sparkles and relevance all the time. It's something that delivers, very, very quiet value over time. To me, that's the value of daily Scrum.
There's somebody over here.
It can be that I made progress, and if you don't make progress, then you better stand up and raise your hand.
Yeah.
And find somebody else on the team that can give you
Go
a
here, no, go here.
So from my perspective, those who are lucky enough to become superstars, at that point, you've developed a higher level of responsibility. Perhaps at that point, if the rest of the team is developing, you've got a team of 6, and the rest of the team is doing 2 points, and you're normally doing 5, well then do 3, and help the other people on the team do 3 as well. Superstars shouldn't be the ones who are doing all the work. They should be the ones who are doing the mentoring and bringing the rest of the team up. It's a classic musician's problem. Never be the best person on the band. If you're the best person in the band, you don't grow. You don't push. Nobody is pushing you harder to do better.
Very good. Yes.
But I think with the daily Scrum, to go on and on and on about what you did yesterday just wastes a whole lot of time. Everybody just gets really tired of listening to that. And so maybe talking a little bit about what your progress was, but just talking about the future and what your issues are. What's stopping you. That's how the meeting should go.
So I was going to kind of go the opposite direction of him. The paradox of the morning Scrum is the guy who did the most to help the most people the day before has the least to talk about. Because by the time it gets around the room to him, everybody else has already talked about
Compared with him, or compared with her, and we worked on
and you
this
just
together.
say, yeah, what those people
I worked
said.
with those guys.
And then you go around.
Yeah, it's interesting.
2 comments. One is that if you're in a Scrum and you said, I'm still working on what I started yesterday, that's an anti-pattern. You shouldn't be having stories that long, hopefully. The other one is that I've been on a Scrum team that didn't allow pairing. So it was really difficult to mentor.
Yeah. It is hard. We'll talk about the pairing piece in a minute. I don't mean to be flippant about the long stories, because it is hard. We're trying to help a big, or what should I call them? A big they manufacture telephones. And they're having a real hard time splitting their stories. And so the one thing I would say is try that there's a human nature thing that says, I got something done yesterday. And it reinforces itself. The fact that you got something done. And the analogy I use is for analysts that are working on a document of some kind. And you say, well, I worked on the document yesterday and I went to some meetings. I worked on the document yesterday. And they do that for 2 weeks, right? To say, I got chapter 1 done. And I got a draft, and I did the outline for chapter 2 done. And then tomorrow I'm going to work on I'm going to try and finish that and work on the issues that I found back on chapter 1 and refactor that, right? And there's something innately human that reinforces your spirit to say, I got something done yesterday. So it's hard. I'm not dismissing that it's hard to split stories, but it's usually helpful to do so.
Well, it's also not so much about splitting the story up, it's just tasking, which is essentially, it's up to the team to develop a set of steps, because you can't go from here to South Seattle without doing something.
One step.
Yeah, it's not possible to do that. So even if you're writing a lot of code, and even if you're doing a lot of stuff, it's like, well, okay, I'm dealing with the database interface function. I'm dealing with the API layer interface. I wrote the mocks for the testing framework. Now the other thing is keep the managers out of the damn stand-up meetings, because nothing is worse. Nothing's worse than having the manager standing there, because then everybody feels compelled to do a 5-minute dissertation on everything they did the day before, so they don't look like they're laughing. It's like, if the manager's not there, a lot of people are like, I work with him, and that's the end of their report. But if the manager's there, like, well, I did, and on and on, and then the manager's there.
That's a great point. In fact, I'm going to take that advice.
So if your managers were there, that might have been working because they're dragging your meetings.
Yeah, like I said, the other truism is truly stand up and truly keep it short. And if 15 minutes is too long, make it 5 minutes. And in our reports, our guys tend to say, if they take 30 seconds, they're being verbose. I mean, I worked on this yesterday, and I've got this problem, and it goes amazingly fast.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do quite frequently is we have the Scrum Master run the 5-minute, run the meeting, and he's basically going over the task list we have that on a wiki page or on something.
Yep.
And he's walking down a task list, he's like, well, okay, I did this. And then if someone wants to talk about something more, if they take more than 30 seconds or more than a minute, he's like, okay, stop. We write it down on the whiteboard, that like, we're gonna have a discussion about this.
As soon as we're done.
We finish the meeting, and then it's like, okay, we're done with the meeting, and anybody who's interested in this particular topic, stay.
Yeah, that's a good one we do too. That's a good one. Along the way, the thing I have a hard time with teams that have been meeting for a long time is they stop bringing up impediments. They stop bringing up how can I be better, faster, smarter, stronger, beautiful, better looking. So don't bitch, but come up with some ideas that says, you know, if you would just get me 2 strings instead of 1, I'd be more productive. If you would just tear down these cue walls, that'd be better. If you would let me go to no fluff, if you would pay for me to park to go to SeaJUG tonight, I'll be smarter. That's an impediment that a Scrum Master can do something with. So you as a developer, think of one of your contributions to your organization is constantly giving some people an opportunity to remove an obstacle for you. Instead of, you and your friends get around and, what's that?
We had to put the walls back up. Because our managers used the excuse that we were going Scrum and Agile to remove all the walls, and so now all of the teams are sardined into little rooms with like 9 people in a room.
Everybody's got their headphones on, right?
Yeah, everyone's got their headphones on.
But I'm sure everybody bathes well, and everybody has good breath, so I can't imagine that's a problem. So anyway, to the degree that you sit around with guys after work or at lunch and say, damn it, I wish why don't we bring that up, bring it up, get better, and be proud of what you do. When you guys do, at the end of the sprint, when you're doing your demonstrations, hopefully the people that are doing the work are doing the demonstrations. Now I'm going to call on myself that in the past I've not done that. As a Scrum Master, it's been kind of fun for me to stand up and say, hey, look at what my team got done today, this week. This is pretty cool. And honestly, it's a shame on me kind of thing, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Because it's really cool to have you stand up and say, here's what I worked on, and the Scrum Master sits off to the side, and the product owner sits off and listens to them. So again, there's having that pride in the work. Again, it's just a basic human nature thing. There's no technical, I don't have any studies around this. I'm just saying that when you get a show, here's the things I did, there's something cool about that. Yes?
This is kind of basic, I guess.
Yeah.
But, okay, so we have product managers that are creating user stories.
Yep.
And then they tell us to make dev cards. And we actually put those up on our whiteboard.
Okay.
And we work off of those when we do our daily scrum.
Okay.
But like he was saying, sometimes you might have done a little tiny piece of that whole dev card. Does that mean that you should have smaller dev cards, or do you just say, yeah, that's a little piece of that card, and that card has not moved for 5 days because this was a big task?
When on a daily, probably, are you talking on a daily basis or at the end of the iteration?
On a daily basis.
On a daily basis, it's okay to say I did this little piece. I think it's perfectly okay to say, it took me 6 hours. I didn't think it would. It took me 6 hours to mock up this screen. I had to go back and forth, and so-and-so was out of town, and it took me 6 hours to get this thing done. And it's a piece of getting this whole thing done that we all acknowledge. So to me, I think it's perfectly valid to say, I got this thing done.
I do want to point out, though, you probably shouldn't have tasks that are about 5 days long. We generally try and do our estimation. We use the point system. It's either like short, small, medium, large. And for the large tasks, okay, we know they're going to take time, but usually even for those, we'll have smaller tasks kind of break it down into smaller pieces, scoping, stuff like that. But you really shouldn't be having tasks that are week or week and a half long. It just comes only 2 or 3 weeks.
When I teach it, we say a story should be no more than half a sprint long as an estimate. Half a sprint. And that means if you blew your estimate, you're still probably going to get that story done in the iteration. Because what you don't want to do is have a story span the iteration.
And there's nothing preventing you from then taking that story. If you've got a 2-week sprint, so you have a story that's a 5-day story, there's nothing preventing you, for your own sake of sanity and progress and motivation, from breaking that down into a series of tasks that okay, here are the 5 sticky notes that sit on top of the card that is in this spot, and we're moving these from left to right because as we're making progress through them. Now pull things done and we can move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the other, one of the other things of, one of the key essentials of breaking it down is that not everybody is 100% busy all day long.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times where, like, I'm waiting for a QA to finish testing something, and I often go look at the task list and say, well, there's something small I can kick out, or maybe get started a little bit.
Very true.
I was just gonna say that, we've experienced where if you're too task-centric, the story can not get finished.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know, you can't be like if the manager is tracking tasks as opposed to stories. And it's like, okay, there's a resistance to putting new tasks up here. So I've got all the tasks done, but the story still isn't done.
Yep.
We weren't complete.
Another good anti-pattern.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
no, that's good stuff. Good discussion, thanks, guys. Rules of, oh,
It
yeah.
seems like all this, I haven't done this stuff yet.
Okay.
But it seems like all this assumes that everybody knows exactly what the tasks are at the time, ahead of time. And you really don't, right?
You have it's just like estimates. When you sit down to plan your iteration, part of our iteration planning is to say, okay, what are the tasks that I need to get this story done? You know, as a customer care agent, I need to be able to log all calls that I make so that I have good reporting. Okay, so to do that, I need to have a database field and a screen field, and I need to do UI, and I need to do these 5 things. As he was just saying, as you get into it, it's perfectly okay to say, you know, I forgot all about security. We need to do a security task in here. I forgot all about getting the DBA's approval. That takes 4 hours to do. I gotta go schedule time with him and get that done. Okay, add that task. There's nothing inviolate about the task list. To me, it can be changed at any time. By the way, a good rule of thumb that I heard that it was kind of an aha for me. Guys had standard tasking, and they said the first task on every story was confirm the acceptance criteria for the story. It was kind of cool. And the last one was check to see if I met the criteria.
And the acceptance criteria should be with the business guy who created the story and QA.
Yeah, it was an interesting one that I'd honestly not thought of that. It's a standard task. The first thing, make sure you know when I'm done. That's a cool way to.
Yeah, we also have fixed done criteria. So
Definition of done for the team.
So on the story, so the tasks, if you don't complete all the tasks by the end of the sprint, who cares so long as the story's complete?
Yep.
So if the team
If the
is
story's
so busy doing stuff, they forget to mark off, they check the tasks, we don't care. And we use a binary system. Either it's done or it's not. There's no half done, there's no half points, there's no nothing.
Yep.
It's either you get the points for the completion or you get
Totally
zero.
agree. That's the beautiful thing about this. It's either done or not done.
And then the last thing, at least from my perspective, if you're in an environment where managers rule by fear, go find a new environment.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. XP, and I apologize for you guys that if you haven't got this, I'll be glad to talk to you later. I'm kind of blasting through this, assuming you guys have some knowledge. This is all that Kit Bex and those guys that they're a lot smarter. This is a pretty information-dense slide. This comes from Extreme Programming. I tried to highlight some of the key things.
Just try and do it all.
Do as much. Well, I guess my main message is do as much as you can, be as agile as you can. So here's what I'm trying to do. The planning is very much like Scrum. XP's and planning, XP and Scrums have a high degree of overlap on how to plan. From a managing perspective, you know, get open workspace. Work together. Trying to not have heroes on the thing, and cubes can cause some issues. Sustainable place. Don't plan on overtime. Don't plan on people work. It's still shocking. I used to work for EDS when I first got out of college. I worked for Ross Pro, and that's where I first learned the definition of death march. And it was a normal thing for them. Oh, well, of course you're going to work 70 hours a day, and you can take Christmas Day off, but be back the day after, and be here Christmas night till Christmas Eve, and that's normal. What's your problem? Crazy. I didn't work there very long. Measure velocity to help come up with your estimates and use that based on your performance and not arbitrary dates. Move people around, share your knowledge. In your designs, go for simplicity. Again, a lot of overlap. CRC cards, we talked about story cards. These CRC cards. Don't go down rat holes. Here's a tough one. A lot of people, good developers have a hard time with this because we've been trained the other ways. don't add functionality until it's ready, until you got a requirement. Because you're a smart guy, you're out there and you're saying, you know, I know we're gonna need this, I'm gonna add this functionality, because they're gonna want it. Sure as anything, in 2 weeks they're gonna ask for this thing, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add it. Don't do that, because in 2 weeks they're gonna change their mind and decide.
First rule of optimization is don't optimize.
Yes. So I'm gonna blast through there. I apologize, we're going a little long here.
Second rule of optimization is when you need it, write it. Don't make the database do it for you.
Yeah. Get the customer, verbal's better, code to standards, unit tests. You guys all do unit tests? Automated unit tests are a good thing.
That's it.
XP says do pair programming all the time. Still pretty radical for a lot of people.
It's
I would
really
guess
hard to get.
90% of countries, the people don't do it.
We can't get developers here. We got like 300 developers in-house. They don't like doing pair programming.
Yeah. If you ever want to disciple a guy that works for us, Mickey Phoenix, he was a true believer. He was, I don't know if you've ever seen Mickey. Mickey's like 6'6", bald, 400 pounds, kind of hard to miss guy, right? And very erudite. I mean, he graduated from Stanford in like 3 years. He's one of the smartest guys around, right? But he says, I hated, because he was a rock star. I mean, he could develop like crazy. He couldn't type fast enough to develop, right? But when he's like, why would I want to pair program? And when he did it, he said within like a day, he's like, well, I'm never coding as a singleton again. So he's a great proponent for that. Integrate your code often. Get a dedicated integration server. Do you have any questions on this? Integrate. The thing I've learned too many times, integrate early.
How many
Integrate
sprints
early.
does it take to set up the integration environment?
Do what it takes. It's invaluable. It's just invaluable. The team's responsible, not ownership. Everybody tests. Have some humility. One of the things to take away is have some humility here, guys. Everybody can help. And code must pass all tests and fix what breaks. Bugs get new tests. So that all comes from things. So what can you do? Automate your builds. Automate your unit tests. Do unit tests. We just got called into a fairly large group at a different large wireless company in town. And I said, so how are you doing? Do you guys do automated testing? He goes, I don't think we do unit tests at all. So it's just reality, right? I'm not passing judgment on it. Code reviews. McConnell in his books, he's got a great presentation with Construct Software. If you haven't been there, go there. They're a competitor, but they're awesome. He said there's low-hanging fruit. There's like 100 good practices that we've known about for 40 years, and people don't do. And one of them is code reviews, and pairing facilitates code reviews.
Pairing is supposed to replace code.
Yes, it does. That's what I'm saying. It's
So
a
pair, you don't do formal
Exactly.
code reviews.
No,
Yes.
pairing
Well, you're
is
con-
code.
It's continuous code.
But yeah, but the point is in the organization, you have to visit that and say, no, this was done with pair programming.
Yes.
Therefore, we don't need to have code review.
Exactly right.
That part is true.
I agree with that.
You have to get
Or rather,
over-
therefore, we've already code reviewed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone else is signing off on it. When we check it in.
Yes. Assume refactoring. This is another one that I don't know if you guys get. Is you're doing development and you say, well, I've got this crufty code. Can I do anything with it? I don't get time. And people are demanding that I do new features. Well, part of your estimate, it's going to be 6 months and $1 million. And part of your 6 months and $1 million is do some refactoring. Assume that you're going to do some refactoring of code, and make it kind of non-optional. Otherwise, your software is going to rust and get moldy.
Actually, a question about the
Campsite.
refactoring.
Yes.
One of the challenges we've encountered, one of the things I think is actually an issue with Scrum, is because the release cycle, we actually believe in the release cycle being really short, we do live releases every 2 weeks. So doing significant refactoring actually becomes extremely hard.
Yeah.
You can't always refactor significantly if the design really needs major refactoring. You can't always do it exactly. And we haven't solved that. It's one of the unsolved problems for us to do with this model.
If you do it consistently,
Yeah,
It makes it
sure.
a lot easier.
You're doing the steady stuff. I mean,
It's the classic how to eat an elephant, right?
Right, but it's every once in a while you really want to do a significant design change, and if you actually are releasing every 2 weeks, it's not clear where you do that because it's like you're kind of finding the two goals, right? It's like, and the releasing every 2 weeks is fantastic.
Well, does the design change have business value?
Sure, I mean, long term it does, yeah.
Then it should be
Yeah.
structured as a story and put on your backlog and prioritized based on the business value.
Right, but it's, what I'm saying is that if the time frame is too long, it's very hard to it's just an opposition.
Well,
It's not that
We
it's
had to
not-
go
it's not
from a
good
weekly
goals,
sprint to a 2-month sprint to refactor
Oh,
a
interesting. So
major
you
part of the
change
program.
the sprint length for that
Yeah.
particular phase. That's interesting.
And then before that 2-month sprint was like a 4-month of preparation, seeing what all had to be done.
Okay.
You need more practice refactoring.
They're actually,
But I want to say thank you for bringing it up, because it's nice to hear the reality. Okay.
I think if you're not optimized, you're not trying to make everything totally optimal at the beginning, you're gonna have to refactor. And you have to keep the customer, the owner, aware of the
Yes.
fact that you're constantly refactoring.
Don't
You
hide
have
it.
to do regression tests sometimes. That's just part of the whole picture.
Totally,
And keep
totally
them on
in
that
agreement.
page.
And not only, it is a hard thing. It's another facet of that how do you split stories.
It's one of the things about the problem that comes out of the Scrum stuff to me, because it's one of the things you don't have that policy. You're working on the more old-fashioned model.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't say do that. It's a model.
so actually, the original Scrum book has a recommendation for how to answer that very question. In fact, I think they have a whole chapter dedicated to it. And the answer is something that I can't even apply here, which is, a shop, they swear they're doing it with Scrum. And the answer is that you define your sprint cycles based off of your release cycle. So if you're going to do a release every 6 months, you set up your sprints so they align.
We're on 2 weeks, right? I mean, that's all.
No, you're doing 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is your.
No, our live releases are 2 weeks, not
Oh,
6 months. 2
wow,
weeks
well,
live
see
to the
that.
public.
You need to
Customers are
spread that out
playing.
just a little bit further. But what you're supposed to do.
Yes, it's really good. No, that's a great model.
No,
It's-
I'm serious.
it's
I'm serious.
great.
The actual recommendation is that every 5th sprint is completely dedicated to infrastructure and refactoring.
They call it hard. Okay.
So what happens is the team works 4 sprints on the new features. The 5th one is about infrastructure, automated testing, refactoring, redesign, and then the 6th one is a release-only sprint.
Which is different, because I think when they first wrote the book, they had no clue that people could really release every 2 weeks. Right?
Yeah.
It was beyond their king that somebody would actually do that. I'm going to keep going because I don't want to keep you guys too late. So here's some more little steps. This is my basic rule of thumb, and if you're mentoring, you guys are all smart guys, and you're mentoring a junior developer, beat this into them. Do them a favor. How do you communicate? First, in person. Number 2, pick up the phone. In person means get up your butt up out of your chair and walk down the hall, go down the elevator and across the street and talk to that person. That's number 1, one with a star. Number 2, pick up the phone and at least have a real-time conversation with somebody who you've hopefully met face first, right? Number 3 is I am.
No.
I am because it's got more. It's got less latency than email. That's all. I'm not saying it's good.
It takes 3 hours in IM to have a 2-minute conversation.
Oh, I'm not saying. My number 1 was to talk person to person. Number 2 was pick up the phone. This is number 3, and number 4 is email.
I'd reverse those two.
I'd argue though that IM or email, 2 benefits. One, it's easier to copy paste stuff.
Yeah.
Secondly, it makes you think a little bit more about how it is you're trying to communicate what you're trying to communicate.
Well, that's why I would reverse those two. I would email
Oh,
IM.
first, okay.
Yep.
I've also been in the situation where my customer was constantly on the road, and he was constantly in busy airports, in fact.
Yeah.
And the only times he would have he would be available for us to chat about stories was when he was in the airport. So we had to conduct our conversations over IM, and we got into a rhythm, and it was really effective.
Yeah. Once you develop that trust is a beautiful thing.
Dragon naturally speaking.
Yeah. Resist estimates not created by you. Don't let anybody give you estimates. Say no. Just say no. Do your daily stand-ups, no more than 15 minutes. Be a grown-up. Show that you can self-manage. Welcome changes. It's a quid pro quo, right? If you can change, they can change. Don't get all hissy if somebody changes. They told you yesterday red, it's blue today. Be nice. Put signs of progress up on walls. Another one of these basic human things, you know, the sticky notes. I got this thing done today, and you walk up to the wall, and it's like getting a gold star when you're a student. It shouldn't matter at all. The fact that you went from this to this, there's a human thing that makes that says I'm a valid human being. I'm worth breathing today. Mock-out interfaces. I continually hear people say, well, I can't demonstrate this, or I can't finish this because I'm waiting on him to get this piece done. Well, mock it out. Make some progress, make some assumptions, have a data contract, have a database contract. Mock it out so that you can make progress. It's less than optimal, but I've even demoed with mock stuff while you're waiting on these other guys to get stuff done. But it's better than not mocking it out at all.
And that actually falls back to Agile, because in Agile design, if you're doing TDD, the fact of the matter is by definition, if you're touching a database, it's not a test, it's not a unit test.
Or mocking up, yeah.
Yeah, if you're touching a database, or you're writing to files, or you're doing something else, it's not a unit test, it's an integration test. They are two separate beasts.
I'm talking about mocking out to get it to demonstrate.
Right, so you mock out the database layer, and then you can test it.
Yep. Have fun. If you didn't have fun today, check out. I mean, why not?
Check my calendar when the last
Life's
time
too
was
damn
scheduled.
short, guys. Come on, have fun going to work every day. Here's just some, I just threw this in, it didn't mean much of anything, but here's some tools we've used. If you see some stuff up here you've not heard about before, ask me later. Cloud testing is one of my little current things. You guys have all heard about clouds, but what can you do with it? How about volume testing? It's shocking to me how few people do volume testing. So get some cloud space, spend $50 and do some volume testing. You know, you can't get a server to do a build with. Take $20 out of your pocket and go buy some space to do an integration server. Some big next steps. If you want to know, get help on carrying this message to people, whether it's pairing or integration servers or whatever. Try and find a pilot project, existing projects. See if you can break things up. I mean, do you mind if I ask who you work with that's delivering every 2 weeks?
Well, that's who we work with. I mean, that is our company. It's a game. It's an online game.
Okay.
Do you want the name of the company?
Yeah, is that okay? Can you share that?
Yeah, the company's name is Flowplay. The website is owl.com. Go there tonight.
Okay. He's my hero. He's delivering shipping every 2 weeks.
Yeah, we ship every 2 weeks.
There's shocking return on investment benefits for shipping regularly and shipping long. I mean, I've got some papers if you really want to see it. The ROI is dramatic.
Can you repeat the name of your company? We didn't hear about here.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
The company's called Flowplay. F-L-O-W Play. Yeah, not the easiest to say name. That's the cheap domain. And then owl.com is the expensive domain. After you raise the money, that's the cheap domain.
There you go. They're a gaming company?
Yeah. If you have teenagers, send them to owl.com.
Yeah.
So you can pay the bill and we'll be very happy.
Cross-functional teams are a good thing. Call us if we can help. So there's an old cowboy saying that says, dance with the one that brought you the party, that you brought to the party. Dance with the partner that you brought, right? So the people that brought us to the party are the people selling stuff and paying the bills. So figure out how to work with them, right? Like Fred is there. And while I queue up this other thing, because I don't want to take too much time from you, the one thing that I'll give somebody $1 if they've heard of Benford's Law, and Tim's excluded. Anybody heard of Benford's Law? Woohoo, I don't have to spend $1. Benford's Law. This is your nugget, the thing that you can go home and tell your spouse about. Benford's Law. There's a logarithmic occurrence of the numbers, the first numbers in a set of numbers, where the number 1 occurs something like 33% of the time, the number 2 occurs about 22% of the time, and then it flattens out rapidly. This law applies to city boundaries, county boundaries, the length of countries, the length of oceans, the length of rivers, populations, voting results. In fact, they used Benford's Law in some auditing, and they proved that the election of 2006 in Mexico was fraudulent. It was literally statistically impossible for the results to come up the way they did.
The IRS was the same thing.
Yeah.
Chimney taxes, that's one of the ways they can tell, right?
And so Benford's Law. So there you go. If you want to learn something new, do Benford's Law. And
Yeah.
and then really this is, you're not going to hear it, but oh, this is awful. You're not going to be able to see it. I was going to say, if you're an old guy like me and you like Fred Astaire and you want to dance with your partner, you do the waltz. And if you're a young guy, you do this. I'm sorry, this is an awful one. This is Wayne's World. They're doing Bohemian Rhapsody. So if you're a headbanger, at least bang in concert with your teammates and your product owners. So anyway, that's it. Any other questions tonight? Yes.
A comment. I've seen in a number of projects where emergent design gets you into an architectural debt, and then you have to do the architectural refactoring.
Yes.
And those are the times when that you run into this, oh boy, can't speak up on this one.
Right. In we don't, no secret silver bullet. Former, or he's still somebody I work with, Chris Sterling, who's very active, used to be part of our company, is now an independent guy, is actually writing a book on agile architecture, where he tries to address those issues, because it's a classic argument, and in fact, Mystical Man Month guy, Brooks, says you've got to do it up front. I mean, he said, boy, you got to have the architect, you got to get all the smart guys in the room and come up with architecture, otherwise you're going to waste all your time and money. I mean, he said that in 1987, but it was still a lot of people believe that. And there's also another real, I think it was Cod and Dave, who said that if you can't have an architecture you can explain to somebody in a couple hours, it's probably too heavyweight. So try and take your intellect to another level, take your complex idea and simplify them so mere mortals like me can implement them. So that would be my thing. No silver bullet. Yes, it's hard. I've got clients though that don't implement because they're worried that they're over here trying to come up with and against that perfect versus the good, right? The perfect architecture is going to be intimately extensible and ultimately flexible and the be all end all, and they never ship anything. It's like, how about we just do something here? There's a power in getting stuff done. So I don't have any brilliant answers on architecture. I'm not an architect. There's probably some smarter guys around.
I was going to say, one of the things we always do is you document what the suboptimal decisions you made were, right? I mean, you have to, that emergent thing's kind of fun, and it's that balance, right? It's not one extreme or the other between the ones you just said. I mean, you have to balance it. And if you make these decisions, it's really important that we make the sprint, or, screw it. Let's have an extra week on the sprint and get this thing done and do it right so we don't screw up through everything else for the rest of the year. And you just got to balance it. How important is it? How much technical debt are you willing to incur? And you talk with the team and say, what's the right thing to do here? What do we want to do? Because everyone's going to pay for it. So when do we want to pay for it?
And the one thing to me is that the best architects are the guys that are willing to get your hands dirty, right? That you're willing to have that architect come down and work with the team, with the mere mortals who are actually having to write code. And that's the best way to actually get an architecture implemented. Because the worst architecture is one that's never implemented.
Just a different question to the topic. And mundane maybe, but just another question about mechanics of Scrum.
Yes.
Never quite solved the question too, just when you're actually doing the planning at the start of the Scrum, actual Scrum again. If you do a good job with your estimation, there should be a sort of 50% chance that you come in under, and 50% chance you go over, right?
Some cancellation.
Never quite figured out what to do with that anomaly, right? Because if you actually come in under, then you kind of have this problem that you don't have an obvious thing to work on at the end of the sprint. So we've always just sort of like over padded, but I bet again, I'm not sure whether is that actually the best solution. We always put kind of like 20% over, so it guarantees that you're not running out of stuff to work on, right? You always know, oh yeah, I know this is the next thing. Or is there a better solution to that problem?
So I'll tell you what we teach. Yeah. And for that's that and $1.50 will give you soda. That we say that the estimates will cancel each other out over a big enough population size, right? for any given story, there might be a 50% high participant flow. If you get 2, statistically, they may cancel each other. So a large enough population set, those variations will cancel each other out and inherit.
But within 2 weeks, I mean,
But he's
you're
asking,
over.
what would you do at the time?
Yeah.
So when you're at the, when you're not finished with your sprint cycle, but you're done with the story,
Yeah.
what do you do at the time? And the answer is you coach.
Yeah, okay.
You look at the backlog and go, what do you do that?
So that's essentially the same.
Right.
That's, and we're saying essentially we're pulling the things off. We want to make sure, making the decision about what's the next thing.
Yeah, because you committed to get this much done, you've succeeded,
Yes. That's fine.
and anything
That
beyond
is the
that,
next thing.
gravy.
It is.
Work
and,
bug
you know, hopefully
CRs.
You've worked with a
Well,
product.
that's, yes, that's a possibility, right?
Yeah, and I can speak to specifically what we do, which is, so as he was mentioning, when you're trying to get done, sometimes you do the less ideal thing, you cut corners. So we have a practice of anytime that happens, we document it, we create a story that is a tech debt story, and that goes into the backlog. And if you're done and there's still room to sprint, then what do? You go pull something out of the tech debt backlog and you fix it.
Yeah, I got a couple teams that do
Lot-
that too.
lot of
Because
people have to do that.
they're always, you're always aware of these.
Yeah.
Some you can take on, some are not, and you just leave them over here if you're done early. The one thing I would say is if you get done early, if it looks like you're gonna get done early, is hopefully you've got that good open communication with your product owner on what can I do next. And again, because the next type's priority might be a giant thing that there's no way to get done. If you say, hey, I'm in here, but I can get this number 17 done, can I pull that one in? And they say yes and do that. Or you refactor, or you go to training, or you do all the things that you never give yourself a break to do, like read a book, or something like that.
Dust your desk.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for a virtual team? Like,
A virtual team, is that what you said?
like, yeah, everybody in your team works in different places.
It's what Agile and Scrum, Agile will tell you is it's suboptimal first, so I just want to say that having people spread all over is really hard. We were talking about Ruby earlier, and if you've read the 37 Signals books, the guys that wrote Rails, they're all over the place, right? So they worked in a virtual way. It's better that we sit together and talk, right? But if you're spread out, what do you do? And the classic one that we all deal with is your team's in China, your team's in India, your team's in Holland. What are you going to do? Again, less than suboptimal. You probably need some more automated tools, like a version 1 or a Rally or something to keep track of your requirements. Jira's got some stuff to help you see what's going on. Ideally, you probably want to move, if you've got a team in India, for example, you probably want to move to the East Coast, because then your time zone difference is 4 hours less. Right where we're at, Seattle's actually horrible for dealing with Asia from a time zone perspective. It's a real challenge. We do it. I show up at work at 7:30, and they stay until 8 o'clock. 8:30 at night their time, and we have our daily stand up, and we talk to each other about stuff. It's not good. We've tried remote pairing. We worked with a team in Boston. Yeah, it was interesting where you're in Boston, I'm in Seattle, and we were trying to work on the same thing. It was interesting. Mickey, who I mentioned earlier, who's a huge proponent of pairing, didn't like it. His dad, who was on the same team, was another developer, actually did like it. So it was even a smaller group of people that could deal with that remoteness on a pairing basis. Tim was on with me on a team where we had it was a mixed team, and some solutions are here and some was a client. The client was in Atlanta, and so we had to be very good about check-ins. How often you check in, have a common code repository. You got to be really good at checking in all the time. If you break the build, you got to be wary of it. And that's true whether you've got a team across the hall or a team in another country, right? But you got to be careful about that. So no magic bullets. It's harder. It's already hard, and you just made it harder.
I think
You're going to earn your money.
Also, if I can add, there's a couple tools you can use for that, which is one of which I've used successfully is a tool called Mumble, which is a team speak thing. Mumble. And what's nice about no, it's not Skype. We've tried Skype, we've tried a couple of other ones, and our primary problem with them is that if two people talk simultaneously, you get garbage. The nice thing about Mumble is Mumble somehow manages to make it sound like everyone's in the same room. So if more than 2 people are talking, you can actually understand everything's being said. And so, Mumble with shared desktops, it's like, so you have like a team thing, and then you have like other, like private rooms, so it's like, meet me down in the penalty box. Let's go to the penalty box, we're gonna go to the chatty Cathy's, and
That's a good one. So there's probably some investment you need to make.
much better than instant messaging.
We had yeah, it is. No, it is, because that kind of face-to-face is much better than
Yeah, because then you just have your headphones on, you're talking to the person.
We had a client that was down in Sacramento, they had a dev team in Memphis and one in,
Chihuahua. Mexico.
yeah, Chihuahua. Yeah,
Chihuahua.
Chihuahua, so they were in Chihuahua, that's right, thanks, Tim. And so they invested in some pretty high-end video conferencing gear, so that they would constantly be able to have 360 views of each other, and you could see everybody around, yeah. And so they invested in that stuff, and it seemed to help. It seemed to help.
So we did that with a company in India and like sister companies that we had. It was like 50 grand a pop for some of those big
Yeah,
ones.
it's
If you're not doing webcams and stuff. I mean,
It's
it
one
was
of those
expensive.
false economies of dispersal that you have to deal with.
I was gonna say, there is a technology out there that's currently in patent submarine land. It's called FaceTop. And it's developed at a university. At the time, it only worked on Mac. It basically superimposes pictures of the videos of 2 different people on the same screen as if they're sitting side by side. And it actually, you can point to the screen and the other person can see where they're pointing.
Oh, I remember that. So you can point a line to code. I saw the demo for that.
What's it called?
It's called FaceTop. And what we need is someone to produce one open source.
Okay, go forth and create tools for dispersed teams. Thank you guys.
So in case folks are interested, we do meet for beers at Virginia Inn. Just meet outside in the lobby. Thanks everyone. See you all next month.